Hi everyone, I'm about to give you 12 of my biggest predictions for the sport I love, running. Let me know what you think. Am I way off base? You think I'm right on some of these? Do you have other predictions? Let me know in the comments below. Hi everyone, welcome to Running Otaku. I am the Running Otaku. And today's video was inspired by some other YouTubers whom I follow, DC Rainmaker and Seth D'Amore. You see, in a post earlier this week, DC Rainmaker was talking about the Garmin acquisition of OTAKU'S, which is a bicycle indoor training company. And also, Seth D'Amore was talking recently about carbon plate shoes and whether or not they should be banned. And it really got me thinking about where this sport is headed. Now, predictions are an interesting thing. They're based on trends, and some trends can be long-term and others can be short-term. So for example, Born to Run, a great book that came out maybe 6-7 years ago and inspired a whole generation of new runners, which is fantastic. And it also brought about the minimalist movement, which we thought would sweep the industry. But actually, after a few years, the reverse happened. We had the maximalist movement with companies like Hoka, and now I think we're somewhere in between. There's some current trends today which are quite obvious and self-evident. For example, the rise of running in China. So if I go to the numbers here, in 2011, China had 22 registered marathons. 6 years later, by the end of 2017, it had 328. Last year, there were over 1,200 running events with over 5 million participants. So it's quite clear China will quickly surpass both Japan and the US as the #1 market, at least in terms of runners. So that's clear, but what I'm really interested about is how these kinds of trends will filter their way into running worldwide. And so some of those facts about China will play into my predictions. Okay, so I split the predictions into 3 different categories: short-term, near-term, and long-term. And roughly speaking, short-term within the next couple of years, medium-term maybe 3 to 5 years, and the long-term probably 5+ years from now. So without any further ado, let's get into it. Okay, so my first prediction is continued growth in trail running. All right, it's not that far-fetched. So in the US, I think the number of participants has roughly doubled over the last decade. In China, it's gone up something like 20 times in the last 5 years, because they've started from a very low number, of course. But I see another factor contributing to this trend, and that is remote working. More and more of us are able to work from home, as long as we have a laptop and an internet connection. And I think more and more runners will start working from home and moving to places like Flagstaff, Arizona, or Boise, Idaho, or somewhere in the smaller towns that are near trails. And it's just going to become a natural for them to train in the trails. And of course, that leads to racing in the trails as well. So I think all of these factors are really going to help promote the sport of trail running. The second prediction is the rise of running vacations or running camps. Now, I moved here to Portland from Bali, and in Bali, there are tons of people that go on these kind of health vacations and retreats where they do yoga in the morning and surfing in the afternoon or something like that. And I think this will kind of find its way into the running community. Now, even I, as a high schooler 30 years ago, did running camps. And I think a lot of high school and collegiate runners do these kind of summer running camps, and professionals go to altitude training and do running camps there. But I'm talking about more the general runner. I think we'll start seeing more and more of their vacation dollars moving away from cruises and beach vacations towards more healthy athletic vacations. And perhaps the trail running boom can help with that too. I can easily foresee a lot of ski resorts trying to make more money in the spring and summertime by opening their doors to trail runners, and running camps, I think, can thrive in that environment. Prediction number 3, the continued use of exotic materials in our running shoes. Now, I believe Nike really kicked this off in the last couple of years with their Vaporfly 4% that has that carbon footplate in the midsole. And I suspect that in this year, 2019, virtually all major shoe companies will follow suit with something similar. But I'm talking even beyond that. So for example, the shoe company Innovate recently announced a couple of shoes that use graphene. And graphene is a new material that is super lightweight and super strong. And so Innovate will be using it in the bottom of their soles. And I suspect that we'll see the introduction of amazing new foams that have a really high degree of elasticity to return that energy that we would otherwise lose. My fourth prediction is the proliferation of treadmill running clubs. Now, we're already starting to see a few of these clubs pop up. So for example, in New York City, there's the Mile High Run Club. In Los Angeles, there is a club called Stride. And I think these types of clubs will start spreading everywhere and follow suit with what we've seen in cycling. So in cycling, first we saw, for example, spin clubs everywhere, and then we've seen Peloton and Zwift follow suit, but with the in-home experience. I think this very much the same thing will happen in running as well. And the China effect, I think, could be important here too, because if you've ever been to China, especially in the winter time, like in Beijing, when they get that inversion layer and the smog is really, really bad, and there's not many places to run outdoors in the first place, indoor running makes a lot of sense. And I think that will help spur the market in Asia, and I think that will find its way into Europe and America as well. All right, so those are my shorter term predictions. Now for the midterm, which I would say in the next, maybe 3 to 5 years or so. So the next one, number 5 on the list, is heads-up display with a remote control ring to control it. So there have been companies in the past like Recon and Solos, which I reviewed, I could put that link up here, that have done heads-up displays for cyclists and for runners, but they were trying to do a bit too much too soon, and the execution just wasn't quite there. So there's a new company now in Canada by the name of North that's doing some really interesting things, trying to keep it simple, and I think that's an effective approach. And of course, I'm sure we'll see Apple in the next couple of years with its augmented reality glasses coming out soon. And I think all of this bodes well because for runners, especially if you're on the track or if you're on the trails, looking down at your watch all the time to get statistics or having to start and stop lap splits just doesn't make a lot of sense. It really would be much better to have it in your kind of field of vision and some kind of remote control ring where you can start and stop and take lap splits as well. My sixth prediction is the emergence of a new and very large running social network. Now, of course, today we do have Strava, and I'll get back to that in a second, but most of the rest of the first generation running networks were acquired. So if I go to the numbers here, so for example, Under Armour spent a total of $710 million acquiring MapMyFitness in 2013, MyFitnessPal in 2015, and Indomondo also in 2015. And then we have Adidas, which spent $240 million in 2015 on Runtastic. And then ASICS gobbled up Runkeeper in 2016 for $85 million. So I don't really think these companies have seen a return on their investment yet, but it's clear they bought these companies because they're trying to form a direct relationship with the runner, albeit digital. And so I would suspect over time that those networks will become more and more proprietary so that they can kind of foster that type of relationship. Now, as all of this is going on, we see something very different in China. Let me go back to the numbers here. So there are some very, very large companies that have already emerged. There's one called Yodo Run with over 100 million registered users. A second one called Keep with 140 million downloads in 2017. Oh, and by the way, they raised $187 million. Then the third company that's only a few years old, but it's growing like wildfire, and that's Joy Run with 63 million users to date. Now, these companies have already surpassed Strava, and while Strava I think was fantastic, I was one of the early users, and I still use it today. I think they've stopped innovating over the last few years, right? There's no video. There's no really good way to communicate. There's no good way to find runners nearby. So, hey, come on, let's join a run. And all these companies in China are doing that. Plus, they're courting the big name companies like Adidas and Nike for advertising. So the potential there is huge. And I don't know if Strava can catch up. Plus, Strava has to worry about Peloton and Zwift and now Garmin with tax coming in. And I think there's going to be a lot of challenges there. And my suspicion is that one of those major companies from China will probably find its way to the United States over the medium term and could be the dominant network for us in, let's say, the mid-2020s. My seventh prediction is the popularity of custom 3D printed shoes. Now, in this video, you can already see Adidas showing off one of their proof of concepts. But as I mentioned earlier, with the advent of these exotic materials, some of them can be used as filaments for the 3D printing. So that will help the transition. Also, it's in the shoe company's best interest. It solves a lot of issues around manufacturing, international trade, other supply chain issues that they may have. And these shoe companies are all trying to forge that direct relationships to as runners. And this would allow them to do so. It would circumvent a lot of running shoe stores we see today, which opens up another can of worms that I won't get into. But I think overall it makes a lot of sense for the running shoe companies. And for runners, it's great, right? We can get the exact kind of shoe and color that we want, and hopefully it'll make us much, much happier. The 8th prediction I have is really more of a wish than a prediction, but I do hope it comes true. And that is the mass popularity of track and field. Now, I'm a big fan, but I have to admit, on TV, it's not very watchable, right? This concept of a 3-ring circus with a bunch of events, instead of really trying to, bring in viewers, I think it's just sort of a chaotic, uneven experience, and it's not very good. I think the track and field body should do something else instead. So for example, this is a video of the Manchester 150-meter dash with Usain Bolt a few years ago, and you can see how it draws in the fans on the side of the street. And likewise, in basketball, for example, probably one of the best places in the US to watch a basketball game is actually at a university, Duke University, and they have the Cameron Indoor Stadium. It's only 9,000 seats, right? It's not one of these 20,000 cavernous seat stadiums. And it's truly intimate, and it's a great real life experience from what I hear. I've never been, but also on TV, it's fantastic to watch, right? Imagine track and field if the audience were right there on top of the athletes and it was a truly intimate experience. I think this would show up much better on TV and bring in many more fans to the sport. Okay, so prediction number 9 is the wide scale use of all sorts of body sensors, right? Sensors to measure hydration, lactate levels, glycogen, something you can swallow so it can passively measure the nutritional content of whatever you're eating, right? So sensors that might be on the skin, that could be under the skin or even ingested. To a large extent, the technology for many of these already exists, but it needs to be miniaturized, it needs to be powered better by batteries, and it needs to be kind of manufacturer ready. We're not there yet, but I'm hoping, like I said, within 5 years or so, we'll start seeing world-class athletes use them first for world-class performances, and then gradually filtering down to age groupers like myself. Prediction number 10, artificial intelligence coaching, or AI coaching. Now, even today, we hear some talk about this, but I don't really think it's artificial intelligence. I think at best it's probably just some algorithms that are continually being tweaked manually. In order for AI coaching to work, we need a lot of what's called training data. It's kind of ironically named for us, but we need a lot of data from my last prediction probably, where we have all these body sensors where we can measure huge amounts of data passively for the athlete in real time, feed that into the system, and then start testing against that and tweaking and having the machine kind of tweak the algorithms automatically. And we're just not there yet. And I think mostly that's because we just don't have the right data. But I think over time, we're going to start seeing interesting results. And like, for example, today, we know that there's a correlation between low heart rate variability and high stress. So if your HRV drops, it might mean you're overtraining. Over time, we'll learn much, much more about training methodology. And we'll start figuring out what's the minimum thing we can do in terms of training or nutrition or sleep to get the maximum results. And I think then we'll start seeing a virtuous circle whereby we're optimizing performance while minimizing the stress required. And that should ultimately reduce injuries, which will make us be able to train even better. And we get this cycle where performances start spiraling upwards, not only for world-class athletes, but for someone even as slow as myself. Okay, the second to last prediction. Prediction number 11, 3D avatars using motion sensing stickers on our bodies, right? I think for gaming, this is pretty interesting. We'll see a lot of this when competing online with others or for social networks, adding your avatar will be pretty cool. But I just mentioned AI coaching. I think human coaching will still exist, and being able to analyze form remotely. So if your coach is in a different part of the world, he can see your avatar and start making suggestions to improve your form. I think it's not only fun, but really beneficial as well. So I hope we see this in the long term. Okay, so all this brings me to my last prediction number 12, the free running counterculture. Now, I've just spent this whole video talking about all these great innovations in technology that will make us better runners. But I'm almost positive that this will spur a segment of the running community to just want to unplug from everything, right? They're just going to want to go out with shoes, shorts, and hopefully a shirt, and just go out and run, enjoy it as a spiritual experience, and unplug from everything and just really enjoy the sport. So I'm most sure that this will happen if any of those other kind of technology predictions take hold. Okay, so those were my 12 predictions. What do you think? Am I way off base? Do you think some of them might actually come to fruition? Maybe you've got some predictions that are way out there. Anyways, I'd love to hear about them. Go ahead and put your comments and questions down below, and I'll read them and we'll start a discussion going and maybe a follow-up video from that. Anyways, thanks so much for tuning in. If you liked what you saw, go ahead and click the like button. If you really liked what you saw, then please hit subscribe. And there's a bell right next to it. You can hit that one too. That way you'll be instantly notified every time I upload a new video. That's it for today. Thanks again, and we'll see you all next time. Bye-bye.